Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this: a woman, deeply in love, grieving over her former lover, locked away with his lifeless body for 4 intense days. That's precisely what happened when French musician Serge Gainsbourg died, and his ex-lover Jane Birkin, the iconic actress and singer, spent days mourning him in a way that shocked and fascinated those around her. Their relationship was a tumultuous one, filled with passion, artistry, and a touch of scandal, leaving an indelible mark on French pop culture. But what Jane Birkin did after Serge's death shows the depth of her devotion to him, even after they had parted ways. In this video, we're going to delve into the complex romance between Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin, and explore that raw, final goodbye she shared with him. It's a tale of love, loss, and a gesture so profound it would forever tie her to Serge Gainsbourg's memory. Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin's relationship began like something out of a French film. When they met in the late 1960s, Serge was already a star in France, known for his brooding charisma, his smoky voice, and his controversial style. He was in his 40s, a seasoned artist. Birkin, on the other hand, was a young actress from England, just breaking into the world of French cinema. She was in her early 20s, and their age difference, along with their distinct cultural backgrounds, only fueled the magnetic pull between them. But this wasn't an easy love. Serge's lifestyle was chaotic. He was known for his self-destructive tendencies, drinking heavily, and living a bohemian life that often led to public scandals. Despite this, Birkin fell for him, and they quickly became one of the most talked-about couples in France. Their relationship was as famous as it was turbulent, often playing out in public and through their music. Their most infamous collaboration, the song Je t'aime, moi non plus, scandalized audiences with its raw sensuality and left no doubt that their love was anything but ordinary. However, their intense love story came with complications. They were two artists, two passionate people, whose personalities often clashed. After a decade together, the couple eventually parted ways, and Birkin moved on with her life, later marrying director Jacques Doillon and having another child. Still, she and Serge remained connected, sharing a unique, enduring bond, even though they were no longer lovers. When Serge Gainsbourg died in 1991 at the age of 62, the world mourned the loss of one of its most provocative, enigmatic artists. France lost a cultural icon, a man whose music, wit, and artistry had come to define an era. But no one felt the loss quite like Jane Birkin. Despite their separation, Serge had always held a special place in her heart. And when she received news of his death, it hit her deeply, almost as if she had lost him all over again. What Jane did next shocked everyone. Instead of simply attending his funeral like any other mourner, she went to the mortuary and asked to see him one last time. She wasn't content with just a final glimpse. No, she wanted to truly mourn him, to be close to him in his last moments. And so, Jane Birkin spent the next 4 days with Serge's body. She stayed by his side, as if they were sharing one last, intimate moment. For some, this might seem unusual, even macabre. But for Jane, this was the ultimate expression of her love and respect for a man who had shaped her life. In those 4 days, Jane went through a deeply emotional journey. Alone with Serge's body, she reportedly spoke to him, held his hand, and poured out her grief. She told him all the things she felt she hadn't said, and perhaps apologized for things she felt she could have done differently. For Jane, it was as though time had stopped, and in that stillness, she could finally find closure. But her behavior was more than just grief. It was a kind of ritual, a return to their past, reliving memories, and letting go of old wounds. By staying with him, she symbolically joined him on his journey, almost as though they were one once again. For 4 days, she was Serge's companion, perhaps rekindling the intimacy they'd once shared, now in a very different, yet hauntingly poetic, form. Jane later described those 4 days as a necessary goodbye, a way for her to process her loss and honor the man she had loved so passionately. It was a gesture that showed the world that love doesn't simply end when relationships do, and that some bonds transcend time, lingering even after death. Jane Birkin's actions only deepened the public's fascination with her and Serge's romance. She became, in the eyes of many, a figure of undying devotion. People saw her as the woman who dared to love Serge Gainsbourg, a man whose very existence was a work of art, and who was just as difficult to love as he was easy to admire. For Jane, this was a private farewell to the man she had once shared everything with. And for Serge's fans, it cemented the idea of Gainsbourg as a tragic, tortured artist, one who inspired a love so profound it crossed the boundaries of life and death. Even today, their relationship is remembered as one of France's great love stories, full of passion, heartbreak, and unforgettable moments. Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg may have been separated by the time of his death, but those 4 days she spent by his side were a testament to a love that remained alive in spirit. It was an expression of loyalty, respect, and a last, intimate tribute to a man she would never forget. There's something deeply poetic about the way Jane Birkin bid her farewell to Serge Gainsbourg. This wasn't just about the end of a romance but the closing of a chapter that had shaped her in ways few people would understand. Spending those 4 days with his body was, in some ways, her way of rewriting the end of their story, adding a personal epilogue to a relationship that had defined so much of who she was as an artist and as a woman. Theirs was a relationship that transcended ordinary boundaries. It was, in the eyes of many, a love affair that was equal parts inspiring and tragic. Even after their separation, Jane remained one of Serge's muses. Her presence continued to loom large in his life, influencing his later music and artistic work. He often spoke of her, sometimes with a hint of bitterness, sometimes with longing. For Jane, Serge was a man whose flaws were undeniable but whose genius and charm were equally impossible to ignore. Their love was raw, imperfect, and turbulent, yet it was honest and intense in ways that left a lasting imprint on both their lives. By staying with him in those final days, Jane was reclaiming something. In a way, she was standing by Serge as she had so many times before, bearing witness to his legacy and embracing the man behind the legend, flaws and all. This act of mourning was her ultimate acknowledgement that, despite everything that had transpired between them, Serge would always be a part of her life. Perhaps it was her way of honoring both the man she had once loved and the artist he had been, a way of saying goodbye not only to Serge Gainsbourg but to that part of herself that would always belong to him. There's another aspect to consider: forgiveness. Many people believe that, in those 4 days, Jane forgave Serge for the pain he had caused her. Their relationship had highs that could make them both feel invincible, but the lows cut deeply. Serge's drinking, his unpredictable moods, and his unfiltered words often left Jane hurt. Yet, despite their past grievances, Jane's actions showed a level of compassion and grace that is rare. She saw Serge, in the end, as he truly was, a flawed but brilliant man whose complexities had both attracted and hurt her. Perhaps her final act of love was simply to be there, one last time, not as his former lover but as his eternal friend, his muse, his Jane. Her time by his side became a final gift, a gesture that went beyond words and touched the very essence of what they had shared. The story of Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin has become almost mythic in French culture. It represents more than a romance. It captures a timeless sense of artistry and the idea that love can linger long after the last note has played, long after the final farewell. Gainsbourg and Birkin's story isn't just remembered for their music or for the headlines they created, but for the depth of emotion they evoked in those who followed their journey. It's a story that resonates with anyone who has loved and lost, who has felt the pull of a relationship that was as nourishing as it was destructive. For Jane Birkin, those 4 days were not just a farewell to Serge Gainsbourg, they were a step towards healing and accepting that some loves remain, echoing in our lives long after they have faded from view. It was a reminder that, even in the most tumultuous relationships, there is room for forgiveness, for gratitude, and for peace. Her act of mourning was a testament to the power of love to survive even the most difficult of circumstances, to remain beautiful in its imperfections, and to become, in the end, something worth remembering. As we close this story, let us think about what Jane Birkin's final act teaches us about love, loss, and legacy. When we lose someone we once loved deeply, the pain is profound, but there is also a chance for closure, a chance to honor what that person meant to us, flaws and all. In a world that often glorifies perfect love stories, the relationship between Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg reminds us that the real beauty of love often lies in its messiness, its resilience, and its ability to endure even the most difficult of trials. In those 4 days, Jane didn't just mourn Serge, she celebrated him. She reminded the world, and perhaps herself, that love does not need to be perfect to be unforgettable. The legacy of Jane and Serge continues to captivate people around the world, not because their love was flawless but because it was real, raw, and deeply human. And so, we leave this story with a sense of admiration for a woman who loved unapologetically, who forgave generously, and who, in her final goodbye to Serge, gave us a powerful example of what it means to truly let go while holding on to the memories that will always live on. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking stories of love, art, and legacy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you'd like to hear more about stories like this one.